We'll drop those into the chat a little bit later as we go through things. We encourage you to use the Zoom chat and the Q&A. Pete is going to be monitoring that throughout, and I'll try and check in here and there as we go through things. The Zoom chat allows you to message one another as well. You can also use emojis and stuff to respond to other things that people might say. If you would like to ask us something anonymously, you can do that through the Zoom Q&A. The closed captioning is available. It should be available to you in the Zoom ribbon at the bottom of your screen on whatever device you are watching on. It does do a pretty good job of things, but we'll try and go through as I will try to enunciate as much as possible so that we can give it the best chance. We are using Mentimeter today. I'm going to turn my camera off so you can get a look at that QR code. You can join using your smartphone and that QR code, or you can go to menti.com and type in that 8-digit code that you see on the screen. That 8-digit code is also going to be at the top of each slide. So if you at any point either get booted off of Mentimeter or you decide that you would like to join partway through, you are able to do that by going to menti.com and using that code. And I think as well as if you need some help, you can drop it into the chat and we can try and assist you as we go through. Once you get joined up, if you want to tap that thumbs up button, that lets me know that we've got at least a few people who've been successful. Looks like we do have some folks who are getting in there. That's awesome. Also, if you don't want to participate in the Menti, you are welcome to answer any of these questions as we go through using the Zoom chat or the Zoom Q&A, whichever you feel more comfortable with. And I do also want to remind folks that the Mentimeter is anonymous. I cannot tell who you are. We can't go back and track through your answers. So if you're worried about that, you also, it might pop up and ask you like something like that if you want to accept cookies, you can reject all the cookies and everything still works fine. So hopefully you will participate. It does make things a little bit more fun as we go through. So let's get started. What are we going to learn today? All right, so a few things that we're going to learn today are what a learning objective is and why you should write them down. We're going to talk through those things. We're also going to talk about how to write an effective learning objective. So after we've talked about what they are, how to write a good one, and then how to decide. At the very end, we'll talk just a little bit about how to decide what kind of resources might be helpful for your training. So let's go through things. First of all, where do we start? We start at the beginning, right? You want to think about when you are doing any kind of training, whether you are training people how to use equipment, whether you're training people how to use software, or anything in between. You want to start at the beginning and decide what it is that you would like people to learn. And then you kind of backtrack from there as to how are you going to accomplish that. So first of all, you want to decide what you're going to have people learn, and then you want to write those objectives down. It's important to get that out of your head and onto some paper, onto the computer screen. So let's test you guys learning a little bit. What is a learning objective? What do you think of when you hear that phrase? It is kind of a more of a academic teaching kind of a concept, but it does, as we go through, hopefully you'll get very familiar with what we're talking about. But this should be an answer that you can type in as well. And again, if you would prefer to type them into the chat, you're more than welcome to do that. But what do you think of when you hear the phrase learning objective? What comes to mind? And we'll give you a little bit of time to a milestone. Okay. What else? Concepts that you'd like attendees to understand at the end of the training. Perfect. What are some other ways to think about a meeting goal? Yes. Or a skill? Yes. In the chat, we've got audience behavior condition degree. Okay. Anything else that folks have? You're definitely on the right track here. A goal is a good way to think about it. Or what do you want people to get out of this training? What are you hoping for them to learn? Anything else? All right. Let's keep going here. When you think about learning objectives, you want to think about what is the outcome that you want. You have to give people some goals to accomplish those outcomes. So an example that I would give is that if you decided that you wanted to run a marathon, is it better for you to prepare for that marathon by joining Old Timers Hockey League and playing hockey a few times a week? Or is it better to prepare for that marathon by, downloading a marathon preparation schedule and running each day and running and increasing your mileage as you go along? Which one of those is going to prepare you more or prepare you better, right? You have a specific outcome. It's good to have specific measurable goals that you can attain to accomplish that outcome. Now, joining the Old Timer Hockey League isn't necessarily it's better than sitting on the couch for the weeks prior to your marathon, but having that more specific training program is going to get you there and have you have a better outcome. So when we talk about these learning objectives, some things that you should think about, why should you use them? So actually writing those learning objectives down and having them established before you start your training, it's going to help you organize your thoughts and organize your training. It's also going to make that training more effective because you can identify maybe some gaps that you might have as you go through things. These learning objectives are going to give you kind of a roadmap of first the folks need to learn this and then they need to learn this next thing. If you don't have that kind of mapped out for yourself, it's really easy to get ahead of yourself, especially if you are very familiar with a topic and you are teaching people who are brand new to it. It is very easy to assume that people have knowledge that they might not necessarily have. All right. Some things that a learning objective is going to do for you. So it's going to convey how a student is going to be different after the training. So what kinds of things are you hoping that this training is going to do for that student? Is it going to teach them a new skill? Are they going to learn new knowledge? Sometimes it's just conveying new knowledge to someone. That might be something like if there is a new specification or a new manual or guideline that's come out and you need to let people know about how things have changed. Or sometimes you're hoping that people are going to change their behavior. That's kind of what today's session is. We're hoping that you guys will take some of this information away and change how you do your training. It could also be sometimes with changing behavior, it might be that you're implementing a new safety system, or maybe it is that you've changed how people submit their expense reports, and they're going to have to change their behavior a little bit. Learning objective is also going to convey how and when success is going to be measured. Are we assuming that people are going to learn things right after the training and they'll be able to implement this new skill or information, behavior, whatever, right afterwards? Or are we thinking that this is going to be something that might take them some time? They're going to need some time to practice and maybe fail a little bit as they go through. And then the last piece is it's going to convey any specific conditions that are going to apply. So if we talk about really broad learning objectives, maybe you're saying that you're going to teach someone how to use heavy equipment, right? But we want to put some more specifics onto that about which piece of specific equipment and what kinds of things are you going to be asking that person to do. So those learning objectives oftentimes, we'll let Pete chime in here a little bit, but oftentimes with learning objectives, we write them down. They start off a little bit broad and then narrow down.
Yes, definitely. Other times I put them together and it makes sense in my mind. I think I got everything covered, and I bounce it off Ingrid and well, did you think about this? What about adding this little way we can measure it and have a more defined way to assess it? The students have actually learned what we're trying to teach them and make it something that they can implement.
Yes, and the same thing. Sometimes I'll write them, I'll send them to Pete and he'll say, yeah, but people need to they need to know this piece first. And we haven't taught them that yet. So that is part of this. It's really helpful to write these down, and it's really helpful to bounce them off another person. All right. So what is going to be different after somebody is taking your training? Are they going to get some new knowledge, like they're explaining some updates? Are they learning a new skill, or is it a new behavior? You need to think about what kind of change do you want that person to have after the training. And sometimes, it doesn't have to be, when we think about change, this could be a very small change that, like I said, it could be we've changed our payroll. Something is a little bit different. All right. So now let's talk about how do we write a good learning objective. We've kind of established what they are. They are a goal. There's something, there's some specifics that we want to think about when we're looking at them, but how do we write a good learning objective? All right, so a good learning objective, if you've heard of SMART goals, it's an acronym. That is a perfect way to approach writing learning objectives for your training. The SMART acronym, sorry, not adjective, the SMART acronym stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So when we're talking about these learning goals, this is a really great way to make sure that you are writing something that is going to be effective for your training. And also, you know, that it's going to be applicable to the people who are learning it, as well as making sure that you are not asking them too much, right? When we're planning out the training, this is something where we've only got an hour with you guys. So we wanted to break something down so that it would be relevant to you, but also something that you could actually do, you know, implement, and also something that's going to fit into an hour. If you've only got an hour of time, you want to make sure that you are doing something that is reasonable for that amount of time. All right, so when we talk about specifics, our specific goals, you want to break a large scale down into small tasks. It's really very helpful and okay and encouraged to have a lot of learning objectives if you are talking about a really complicated skill. So if you were talking about, for example, operating a forklift, right? It isn't just, you know, turn the forklift off, drive around the warehouse, and we're good. It is going to be, you know, how do we safely operate the forklift? How do you turn it on safely? How do you, what kind of safety measures might be implemented in driving forward, driving backward, driving with a load that is being picked up by the forks, operating the forks up and down, what are those types of things, turning while you are supporting a load, maybe even what type of load you have. Are you picking up a pallet of something that is kind of solid, or are you picking up a pallet of like paint buckets where you've got some slosh that's going to happen, and maybe as you go around a corner, those types of things. So it is okay to break each of those pieces down into their own learning objective. It doesn't mean that you are going to be, that you have to kind of sequentially go through each learning objective. Sometimes you're teaching multiple learning objectives all at the same time. Hopefully right now you're getting a sense of like, oh, would be helpful to write these down. And also I'm getting a sense of what a good learning objective would be, which, you know, if we go back to our first slide about what we wanted you to learn today, you're getting all of those pieces. And then like the acronym says, specific, the more specific it's going to be, the easier it's going to be for you to evaluate whether or not someone was successful in learning the information. All right. So let's go and talk about what is a specific task or piece of information that you have to teach. What's something that you guys are trying to teach? I like to get an idea of what kind of folks are in today's training. So what are some things that you might have to teach? And try and be as specific as you can. Safety training, job related. What kind of safety training? You don't have to necessarily reply again if you don't want to, but you know, is it safety training? Is it work zone safety training? Pete, what are some other kinds of safety training that you might consider?
Yeah, so it could be safety related that is off the site that you work. So maybe out on the roadway. It might be actually in your office. There are, of course, safety issues, hazards that you can come across. It might be in a laboratory. It might have some different types of chemicals, different types of agents that you work with, different types of equipment inside the laboratory. So it can really get very specific, and you might want to tailor it to just the employees who are going to be exposed to those type of hazards.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it might help to really pinpoint what you're trying to deliver to your students.
Yeah. Writing daily reports. Again, that would be something, you know, is it an inspection report? Is it a construction report? What kind of daily reports? Is it, you know, is it a vehicle report? What type of daily reports? We've got internal quality control. We can go even further dig down into that one, entry level CDL. Yeah. And with the CDL, there's lots of specifics with that. Some of the things are going to be more relevant to some folks than others. And even within that, I'm guessing I have a hunch maybe who said that one, and I can, are you driving snowplows, or are you driving over the road truck? Are you driving a box truck? What kind of vehicles are you driving? Onboarding, yeah, if you are, that is a huge thing, and breaking that down into all of the different pieces that somebody needs to know when they start a new job. We'll turn our cameras off here. What are some of these other ones? Fleet program paperwork, logging daily repairs made to equipment, teaching mechanics to be report writers. Yes. And having, we'll talk about that maybe at the end, having some resources to let people know what a good report looks like. Community outreach related to, so educating the public versus educating the employees. Snow plowing, salting, underbody plows, wing plows, all of this is good stuff. So when we're talking about these, each one of these is going to be, several of you have things where you could break that down into many, many learning subheading learning objectives. There's a broad thing that you're trying to teach people, but then there are very specific things that you are trying to teach them. And trying to teach people who are maybe reluctant learners. Yes, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment, about maybe how we can make that a little bit more appealing to people. Okay, so when we're talking about these learning objectives, we want to make them measurable. So you have to think about, how are you going to determine success? Do you expect that people are going to be perfect? Because there are some situations where perfection is kind of expected. Or are we going to expect that they are going to improve over time? They're going to improve over their past performance. And then the other piece with learning objectives and training is, how do we know when we're done? How do we know when we have finished and completed training? Because oftentimes, maybe you get to the end of an 8-hour course and you're like, done training. But did you actually learn the material? Did you actually absorb what you're trying to what that change is going to be as you head out into the world? And the other piece of this that I would also encourage people to think about is that training is not a one-time fits all type of thing. Oftentimes you need to do some refreshers. That is part of why OSHA has you do refreshers on a regular basis, is that we want to reinforce good behaviors and good skills and good information. And then we also want to make sure that if things have changed over the course of time, because we are in an ever-changing world, technology changes, best practices change. We want to make sure that people are up to date on the newest stuff. So again, you want to make sure that you are measuring how you're determining success, because especially if you are updating existing training, sometimes you don't necessarily know that somebody has actually absorbed that new information, and they're not just doing it the way that they've always done it. It's really easy to fall back into those old habits. All right. So when we talk about measurable learning objectives, it's really helpful to use very specific language. And Pete's going to drop into the chat. We've got a list of action verbs. And I encourage you, when you are writing your learning objectives, to use that list of action verbs. It's really, really helpful, because those word choices matter. There's a big difference between trying to measure whether somebody understands something and asking somebody to explain it to you, right? If you say that, like, your learning objective is going to be that the person understands, the changes to this manual, how do you measure that? Whereas if you say, by the end of this training, this person is going to be able to explain what the changes to this manual are, that's an easier thing to measure, because you can ask them, can you explain to me what the changes are? And if they can, then you know that they learned it. The other thing is, maybe if you are teaching a new skill, you can ask that person to demonstrate what the new skill is. And so those are some things that I want you to think about, because that when you are writing your learning objective, choosing the right kind of verb is going to make it easier for you then when you are trying to determine, what are we going to do to measure if people know this? Are they going to have to do a written test? Are they going to just show me that they know it? Are they going to tell me what the new stuff is? And the other piece of this is when you make those learning objectives specific and measurable, so SMART, specific, measurable. We also want to make sure that we haven't gotten any misunderstandings where I think I have taught you how to do this. And then later on, it becomes very evident that you didn't understand. There was a key big misunderstanding. And so that is something where, as we go through today, we have these little check-ins to see, like, are there misunderstandings? Do people understand what we're talking about? All right, so here is a multiple choice question for you. How do you guys currently gauge whether your learners have learned the content? Is it job performance? Is it a written test? Is it a verbal test? Is it demonstrating the skill or knowledge? Or is it that you don't have any formal assessment? Demonstrating the skill and knowledge. So I would ask you guys to think even about that, is when you're asking folks to demonstrate that skill or knowledge, are you routinely asking them to do that? Like, do you ever check in later on to see if people are still doing things, or is it a one-time thing? A lot of folks, it's job performance. When we talk about job performance, something that can be difficult for folks is if you do have that misunderstanding with training, it was not a anything that the person maybe did wrong. They didn't understand what they were trained to do. There was a gap in that knowledge. Then they're penalized on their job performance because they're doing stuff wrong, and it isn't that they are you need to correct that. Obviously, you don't want folks to be doing things wrong, but it can affect somebody's career, right? If they are if they've been labeled, but they don't understand things, they did things wrong, and really it was a gap in training. And that can be something too, as we've got folks who are coming in from different parts of the country. So we've got folks in this group who are from Arizona, and we've got folks who are not used to tons and tons of snow out in Washington. And so if you expected somebody to know how to do something, execute a task, and it was just they didn't grow up around that. They did not do this wrong on purpose or wrong maliciously. There was just some implied knowledge that you assumed they had, and they did not have it. That can be really disheartening for folks as they're going through things. So we've talked about goals that are SMART, so it's specific and measurable. Now let's talk about things that are achievable. All right, so when we're talking about an achievable goal, you want something that is going to be, that the person is able to actually do, because that is going to build a little bit of confidence for them. So if we're talking about a task that's really complex or really extensive, you want to break that down into some smaller modules that are a little bit easier to digest. That's why, people go and get a PhD in education. Obviously, we are talking about this learning objectives for an hour. We're breaking this down into something that is a little bit more consumable, and I would encourage you guys to think about that with your trainings as well. The other thing that can be really helpful when you break things down into smaller modules is that you get to take advantage of senior staff's expertise. So when you're doing training, sometimes it can be really easy for senior staff or more experienced folks to kind of disengage from things, because like I've heard this a million times, but bringing them into the process of helping to train and also leaning on them for their expertise, that can be really helpful because it allows them to take a little bit of ownership and prevent some of that boredom. And then the less experienced or newer staff get to learn from them. And so you promote a little bit of team building. It can be a really helpful way to do things. And the other piece too, even if you are not in a situation where it is feasible for you to have senior staff to be doing some of the training or to be participating in that way, if you break things into modules, you can have them kind of test out or opt out of some of the things that maybe the newest staff need to have, and then you can kind of collect everybody then once those newer staff have gotten some of those beginner or intermediate skills. And that can again be a way to prevent some of the boredom. All right. Now, when we're talking about adult learners, we want to make sure that our learning and training is relevant to them. When you are a kid and you're in school, you are kind of just bombarded with whatever the instructor would like to tell you. But as we get a little bit older and we have experience and we have some life experience and some job experience, it is more and more important for folks to feel like the thing that you are training them on is applicable and relevant to both them as an individual and also to the job that they are trying to do. Why are you making them learn this material? How is it going to benefit them? That is a big piece of this. And then the other piece of this is what do they need to know versus what do you want to teach? And that can be really difficult to kind of separate. And also, what do they need to know versus what is just nice to know? There's a whole bunch of educational academic research and theory that is behind all of this stuff that we have kind of condensed down for you today. You don't need to know that. That's nice to know. If you're curious, I can send you some things. Pete is actually going to drop into the chat. We do have a resource for you about learning objectives that goes into a little bit more detail. It's also a written resource if you find that helpful. But we're not, I didn't, read through that to you because that is not going to be helpful for you. So let's talk a little bit here. I'll give you a chance to let me know, how do you show your trainers that, or show your trainees, excuse me, that your training is relevant to them? What are some things that you do? So this is, again, it's important for employees to understand why they are attending this training. What are they going to get out of it? How is it going to be helpful to them? And there's lots of ways that you can convey that. So, but I encourage you to specifically call it out. Hopefully with this training, we have maybe done that this is beneficial to you. It's going to make your trainings more engaging for the trainees and get you a better product because people will learn more effectively, but also hopefully the training will be a little bit more enjoyable for you to deliver. Okay, so some practical exams. So yeah, they get to kind of demonstrate how this is going to help them out. That it's how to help them learn how to complete the field work. How it applies to their day in, day out. Yes. So how are you going to use this new knowledge, this new skill? Showing clips of local news relevant to the safety topic. Yes. Sometimes, especially with safety, sometimes it can be helpful to show people like, this is what happens if you don't do this. These are some of the consequences that can happen. Examples from personal experience. Yes, I have definitely, when I was training new engineers in my previous life as a consultant, there were definitely times where I said, please learn from my mistakes instead of making those mistakes yourself. Yeah, what are some consequences if you do not implement this new information, this new behavior? Pete, do you have some other ones maybe?
One that I was thinking of, but it already had been brought up about the safety, but sometimes you'll sit in the safety training and it just seems horrific. Like why are you showing these dismembered body parts? It's not at all helpful, but there's actually been studies that show that there's a limit how far you can push your mind until you realize, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to fall in to see that to happen to me. So even though it seems very horrific on some of the safety training, especially on equipment, there's reasons for that, because once you see that, it's in your brain and it's seared, or you're not going to want to make that mistake.
Yes, I would like to go home today with all of my limbs intact, for sure.
One really interesting one, if you have spare time, is called Shaking Hands with Danger. So do a YouTube search on that, and it's one of those that's like, wow, it's
they don't hold back.
No, they don't.
They do not hold back on that one. Let's see. Showing people that some of the, like maybe doing it wrong to a ridiculous level, some of the consequences of this is how bad it could possibly get if it is safe. Yes, for sure. Some other ways to show that it is relevant to folks is that sometimes this is relevant because you have to do this or else we cannot continue to employ you, right? There are some trainings where it's like, this is a condition of your employment. CDL training might be one where you have to do this or else you can't work here. Other ones might be required if you would like to advance, maybe. We want to send you to this maybe supervisor training or leadership training because we would like you to move up into that role, and we can't move you up unless you do this. All right, are there any others that folks have? Or do we have anything in the chat? No, hey?
Nope, nothing came in.
All right, we'll keep going, but these are all things you want to stress to folks how this training is going to be helpful to them. All right. Now we've gone through our learning objectives, right? We're at the end of the acronym T timeline. So it said specific. We want our learning objectives to be specific to the training and to the people that we are trying to train. We want them to be measurable so that we can decide when somebody is done with training or when they have successfully completed that training. We know, and we also have a way to know that they have absorbed whatever it is that we want them to learn. We want that training to be achievable as well, so that people feel like they are making some progress with it, and also so that we have set them up for success. We want it to be relevant so that they know why they have to do it. And then this last piece is the timeline. So we want to set some type of timeline, and this is going to be specific to whatever that learning objective might be. You might have some learning objectives that are immediately after this training. You're going to know it. And then there might be another learning objective within the same training where it's like, you're going to need a little bit of time to practice this one. But we want to have that written out in the learning objective. Is this something that by the end of the training, they're going to be able to do? Or is it something where they're going to need a little bit of time, and maybe it's by the 10th time they do this, we expect you to be able to do this correctly. We get that you're going to have some, a little bit of time to get your sea legs under you a little bit, but there is a limit before that we do expect you to be able to do this. Maybe for some things it might be that by the end of their probationary period, if they're a new hire, you get a little bit of time to figure this out, but there is a probationary period. Sometimes I've seen that often with things like that CDL or other types of equipment type training where we understand maybe you didn't have these skills coming in, but in order to continue working, you got to get this under control and figure out how to do this. And then you also want to make sure that whatever the timeline that you choose is, that it does match the complexity of whatever type of task you're asking them to do. So, if you're saying that you don't want to, I wouldn't expect somebody to come into a 1-hour class about juggling and end the class being able to juggle chainsaws. That's not really fair to the trainee. And it also is, you set your training up poorly if that is the type of thing that you're expecting. Maybe the training needs to be longer, or maybe it needs to be smaller trainings over a longer period of time, but you want to make sure that that is kind of matched up. Again, we don't expect you to be able to write a dissertation about learning objectives by the end of this. We expect you to be able to write a learning objective by the end of today. All right, so here's a question for you. Currently, what are you doing? How quickly do you expect learners to master a new skill? Are most of your stuff where you expect them to be able to do this immediately after training? They'll be able to show you that they can do this. Is it something that is within a predetermined amount of time, a week or maybe a month, or maybe the probationary period, or we don't have a set time limit that new skills must be learned? Personally, I found that the last one, we don't have a set time limit, is most often what I have experienced. And unfortunately, oftentimes what I have also done is that we train you how to do something, but I don't give folks that, or I have not been given that feedback about when do I need to know this? And again, as an adult, you want to treat folks with that understanding that these are adults. You want to give them that goal to strive towards and hopefully meet. But you also want to have it clearly laid out to people, like if there are consequences, for example, to not learning this information, you want folks to understand, what is tied into this, because that also helps make things be relevant to people and maybe helps those maybe reluctant learners to be more engaged with the training. So those are some things that I would encourage folks, is that if you are not conveying what that timeline is, that you do convey that information, and that also you maybe if it is a really complex skill, that you also, like I said, with the achievable things, breaking it into modules, breaking this into something where you can kind of test people midway through. You don't expect, you don't go to the end of whatever that timeline is and then say, show me how to do this very complex thing. You've got some points in there where you can kind of check in. Pete, do you have anything to add here with our timeline?
Timelines is, to me, it's pretty important, because you can often just forget it over time. So it's nice to have like a reminder, not necessarily that you're mastering the skill. Well, if it's like a carnival ride operator,
Yeah.
that's something you need to master.
It's got to go.
Especially- But most things you don't have to have something that's very specific, and we mastered it right away. So maybe in increments, learn how to operate it. Let's say within a week, then check within a week, see how they're doing, or do a part way through after a few days, see how they're progressing toward that. So a lot of those are even just, maybe they're not explicitly told during the training, but sometimes they're added on afterwards, and that really helps a learner to be able to try to hit that target.
And I think with the timeline as well, something that can be really helpful for folks is that those intermediate check-ins, again, that's an opportunity for you to identify if somebody has not learned something, or if there are some misunderstandings as they've gone through. All right, so let's practice. Let's write a learning objective from an internal training session at your agency. Let's you practice. Remember, we want something that's going to be specific, measurable, achievable for the person, relevant to their work, and in some kind of timely fashion, some timeline applied to it. So give this a stab. Try out writing some learning objectives, and then Pete and I will try and help you maybe tweak them. I do want to say, as we said before, learning objectives, very rarely do you like nail it on the first try. You're probably going to write it, and then if it's helpful to give it to somebody else, have them take a look at it, or even maybe just come back to it in a day or two. And using some of those action verbs that Pete had dropped that PDF into the chat. Again, that PDF and the other handout, they'll be sent to you via email later on after today. But those can be really helpful when you're trying to write these, because I don't think I have gotten one on the first try ever. It's hard. Again, like I said, these are anonymous, so no worries if you take a stab at this and don't hit it perfectly. That is the whole point of this. We're asking you to indulge us a little bit and try some of this out, and we'll hopefully help you out. All right, so thank you for this one. The staff will identify all 4 required PPE items at the end of this session. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is great. It's going to be relevant to folks, especially if you during the training show them consequences of not using that PPE. And you're saying that by the end of the session, which I think that's a very reasonable and achievable thing. Understanding the basic daily operations. All right. I would say that we could probably be a little bit more specific on that one. And again, that understanding is a really hard thing to measure for people. What do you think?
Yeah, so maybe explain or list out the basic operation steps for starting out your day, or to log in your time, or whatever those steps are.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So having something that's a little bit specific, and of course, something that they can demonstrate that they learned.
Yeah.
They're not just understanding it, but also how can you, as the instructor, recognize that they have learned what you're trying to teach them?
And so this right now, what we are doing currently, this is a perfect example of what we're trying to get you to think about, is that we are asking you guys to write a learning. I said by the end of the training, you're going to be able to know what a learning objective is and write an effective one. So we are trying to give you an opportunity to write that learning objective so that we can see maybe there's some misunderstandings about this. Maybe there's some things that we can do to help you guys as learners. All right, so we've got a third one here. Within 6 months of hiring, the new employee will be able to independently prepare, perform, and document an inspection of a simple, small public water system. I think that's really good. I think that I don't have a lot of notes on that one. Kudos to you, who wrote that one. I think that's really helpful. There are probably going to be a lot of other learning objectives in whatever training this one would apply to. You're going to have a lot of sub learning objectives to go along with that, but that is a great one. I think that's awesome. And I do want to extend this to you guys. If you are doing training and you at any point, throughout the year would like to shoot me an email and say, what do you think of these? I'm happy to get on the phone or email back and forth and try and give you a little bit of help with these. That is part of the service that we offer here at LTAP, is that we are here to serve you guys. So if other folks have any other ones, I encourage you to write them in. You can also drop them in the chat as we go along too, if you think of something, and we can pause and take a look at them. But hearing no others,
I got one.
oh, sure.
How about, know how to run and operate a motor grader? What do you think?
Ooh, that one, there's some pieces there, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we need to be talking about what are we doing with that motor grader? Are we grading shoulders? Are we grading a gravel road? Are we what angle are we using? What kind of crown are we trying to achieve? There are a lot more pieces to that.
Yep.
That is a good starting point. And oftentimes that's what I do, is I start broader and then start to narrow things down.
Yep. Yeah. So just knowing how to operate the motor grader, I know how to push the buttons.
Yes,
I
I
know how
can
to
make
make
it go
it,
forward or backwards. And
but what are we trying to achieve with it? That's why, like you said, one of those things that we're gonna add, how to grade a gravel road within 1% of a 5% crown, and do that in maybe 4 or 5 passes, and learn that within a week.
Yeah.
Be able to demonstrate that within a week. So add those other components that really help the learner try to nail down what they're actually supposed to learn.
yes, for sure. All right. Let's keep going here. Thank you, Pete. I appreciate that. All right, let's talk a little bit about learning style. So this is kind of the eat your vegetables idea. You may have heard of learning styles, things like I learn best by watching a video, or I learn best by reading a book, something like that. Those I wanted to let you know, and this is the one piece where we're going to go a little bit into some research, is that the research shows that isn't actually real. That's what people prefer, right? So it is something that is how I prefer to learn something. It doesn't mean that is the best way for someone to learn something. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit as we go along here, because that can be helpful for how you decide to supplement your training with any handouts or resources or whatnot. Is that a lot of times people will say, well, this is how I learn best. And that's not true. That's how they prefer to learn. And that is a really important distinction to make, because sometimes what is best for you and how you are going to learn is not what you prefer to do. Sometimes you got to eat your vegetables. Oftentimes as an engineer in engineering school, we did a lot of group projects, and people are like, I hate group projects, and I don't, group projects are useless and everything. And it's like, what do you think you're going to do when you go out and get a job? Your whole life and your career is a group project. Even if you work as an independent person, you still are going to have to work for clients. You're still working. Guess what? You're on a group project. So let's take an example of learning TikTok. Let's talk about this a little bit. Which do you think is going to be the most helpful if you are trying to attempt a new recipe? Is it going to be most helpful for you to have a video demonstration, to have one-on-one help from an expert, to watch a live demonstration, to have an expert walk you through the steps over the phone, or to read a recipe, but there are no pictures in this recipe, it's just text? We had Thanksgiving here last week. Having the expert walk you through steps over the phone, if you're unfamiliar, Butterball does have a turkey hotline. You can call them and they will teach you how to cook a turkey over the phone. I have never called them, but I have heard great things. So it looks like for this group, most of you guys are saying video demonstration or having one-on-one help from an expert. So what I would like to convey with this is that there isn't really a wrong answer in this of these choices, right? It kind of depends on what are you trying to teach somebody, what are they trying to learn. So having one-on-one help from an expert is really helpful in the moment right then. But it is, we'll turn Pete's camera on here. It's not as helpful if I have to go back and do this again.
And also if you don't know the terminology that the person's using or that you're reading on the sheet of paper.
Yeah,
You don't know how to beat eggs until they're stiff peaks. Like, I don't know, what does that even look like?
right. There's no pictures.
Yeah, so having that, maybe a live demonstration or a recording, something you can look at, you could see, something you can look back to later that you know what that actually means. Because sometimes just reading it on a piece of paper doesn't make any sense.
No, there's lots of factors that go into what is going to be the most helpful. And you know, are you a seasoned cook, or have you don't know how to boil water? Are you someone who is going to have to make this recipe over and over and over again? Or are you making it twice a year? Because the video demonstration might be really helpful for somebody who's familiar with cooking, but isn't going to make this recipe very often because it's something they can refer back to. You can pause a video. It's harder to pause an expert as they are demonstrating something to you, especially with cooking, because things are going to continue to cook. The watching that live demonstration, having that expert over the phone, that could be helpful depending on what you are trying to do. If you're just getting a little bit of input from them, but they're not going to be able to see what you're doing. And a recipe with no pictures can be really helpful if you understand what's going on. Not so much if you don't. All right. So, what are some other things? What might contribute to your ability to master a new recipe? What are some other factors here? There are definitely some things that we didn't touch on. We talked a little bit about, whether somebody has experience or not, but there's some other things that might really do healthy ingredients. That's a huge piece. I have definitely started some recipes and then gotten partway through and realized, whoops, I don't have that. Is it? And then we'll also say, do you have enough cooking knowledge to know what a reasonable substitute is? You can substitute Colby cheese for cheddar cheese. You can't necessarily substitute like ricotta cheese for cheddar cheese. That might not work out so great. Do you have the right tools? Yes, that is huge. Do you have the equipment? It doesn't help you if somebody is asking you to pressure cook something and you're like, I don't know the pressure cooker, that's not going to work. Do you have that knowledge base? Skill levels? Terminology is huge too. Yes. Do you have a sense of what the recipe is supposed to taste like when it's all done? Yeah, do you have the proper heat? Do you if you are cooking over an open flame versus cooking on a stove top, that's definitely going to be different. Your ability to measure, whether or not it's in English units or metric units, that could make a huge difference. I don't have measuring cups that are in metric units. I have cups, and I also I have a kitchen scale somewhere. I suppose I could measure in grams if I really needed to, but that's not how I normally cook.
Well, who you're preparing it for?
Yes, are we worried about this? Am I making this for my future in-laws and I'm really nervous about this? Or is this like, I'm just cooking on a Tuesday night just for myself? It's not a big deal. Distractions, yes. Is this something, am I trying to prepare this well? All of my relatives have descended for Christmas Eve and I am trying to cook a big meal. Or is this a nice calm, Sunday afternoon? Do I have enough time? Yes. Have I given myself enough time to complete this? These are all great things. And these are all things that you want to kind of be thinking about when you are thinking about the types of resources that you might give folks. All right. So the other piece of this is that we want to consider driver's education, right? So this is, again, one of those I might prefer to read a recipe, but depending on what the situation is, reading a recipe might not be the best way for me to learn. When we talk about driver's education, there's a classroom portion and a hands-on portion to that. And the reason is because neither one of those would be as effective individually as they are combined. It doesn't help for you to know how to identify street signs, and be able to check that off on a written test. If you go out into the world and you don't know the gas pedal from the brake pedal, right? It also doesn't help for you to be able to be, a Formula One driver if you don't know what the signage means as you are flying down the highway. Okay, so when we talk about some of these resources, there are some things to consider. What is going to be the most useful? So when you're talking about this, we want to consider how often is somebody going to do this task? So like we talked about with the recipe, is this a task is this a recipe you're going to make all the time? Maybe and you're a very familiar cook, maybe having a written recipe just so that you can quick refer back to it is perfect. But if it's something that you're not going to do very often, maybe having a video is going to be the best thing for you. Something that you can pause as needed. It can be really helpful, especially something that might have a lot of steps to it. And you do one thing, and then you have the video that you can refer back to and work through. The more detailed your resources handouts is going to be more helpful for those infrequent tasks, because people aren't going to remember all the steps. It's just, you don't do it that often. The other thing that I want to encourage folks is that you can screen record on your computer or your phone. If you are trying to show somebody how to do something on your computer or phone, you can open up a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, just hit record, share your screen, and show somebody how to do something. You can also do the same thing on your phone. You can screen record your phone. And that is a really helpful, quick, easy supplement for people, because they can actually then see what you are doing and what's getting clicked on. And it's a lot faster than trying to take screenshots of everything and then notate those screenshots. And I think a lot of times people kind of shy away from doing some of the screen recording because you might stumble over your words a little bit, or it might not be completely perfect. You might misclick something. And I would also encourage folks, don't worry about that. It's still going to be more helpful to them than having nothing at all. And so I want to encourage you to do those things, even if they aren't perfect. For the more frequent tasks, having less detailed handouts can be helpful. Something that just has some bullet points on it, or some pictures, a couple of pictures. But I do also want to encourage you to think about the fact that when we're doing something really frequently, that doesn't mean that we never ever need to review whether we're still doing it correctly. Especially if you're asking people to change a behavior of something that they do all the time, that can be really difficult for people, because you are in the habit of doing it one way. And it's hard to break out of that habit. So if you are asking people to change the behavior of a task that they do frequently, you're going to have to kind of change the way that you're doing your training a little bit. Maybe break things down into even more specific things. Maybe have more check-ins with them, make things a little bit more measurable. Maybe also conveying the consequences of not doing it this new way. Those are all things that you want to think about, because especially when we're talking about changing behavior for something that they do all the time, it's just inherently tough for everybody. That's just human nature. And again, when you are taking away this training from what we talked about today, I want to encourage you to think about things in terms of continuous improvement and not about perfection. This is a Mark Twain quote that I like, that continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. A lot of times we put stuff off because we're like, it's not perfect. I don't want to do it until it's perfect. I would encourage you to make some of these small changes. You can take any one of the trainings that you are currently doing. Just write down the learning objectives. You don't even have to change the training right now, but just write down the learning objectives for that training and see how your current training aligns. And then you can start to piece in a little bit of changes to what you are currently doing. I also would encourage you to think about some of these small changes, like the screen recordings. You can make some of these changes, and the output, the handout, the resource, whatever you have is better than not having anything at all. And so even if it isn't perfect, that's still okay. your trainees are going to appreciate that as a resource. And so, Pete, do you have anything else to add here before we end things?
Nothing major comes to mind, but just like you to reiterate what you said, just keep working towards not perfection. But I would like to add, if you are carnival operator, please be perfect.
I would like to not just go flinging off of the tilde world. Thank you very much.
Like everything is, there's a exception. Of
Yes.
course.
Yes, but yeah, I would like you to think about your improvements in training as a constant and continual thing, as opposed to we updated it, because that's really the nature of training, is that you update training, but it's not going to be foolproof forever. You're going to have to go back and tweak it now and then. And so kind of getting into that mindset of this is a living thing, this is a living document, this is going to have to be changed as we go along, is a really great way to approach training as well. Give yourself a little bit of grace as you're going through this. All right, so thank you guys so much for being here today. We do have, let me drop that survey link into the chat. We'll see if I did that correctly. Maybe, maybe not. If not, maybe we can, I've got it here. There it is. See, give yourself a little bit of grace. As you're going through today's stuff, we really appreciate you guys. That survey link, it is how you're going to get your certificate of attendance, but it also gives you the opportunity to give us your feedback. So Pete and I have been talking about doing some other trainings that are similar to this one, maybe getting into different aspects of training. If there's something that you would like, maybe designing resources or content or planning content, lots of different topics for training that we would love to talk to you guys about. Also, if you're like, this was really great, but I didn't like doing it over my lunch hour, tell us when you would prefer doing it. All that kind of stuff we'd love to hear. And we do, again, we appreciate you guys coming, and hopefully you got something out of today's. We're going to stick around here for 5-10 minutes, so you have a chance to grab that survey link. And if you have any problems, let us know. Anything else?
No.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much, and hopefully we see you next time. If you have grabbed that survey link, you are free to go. So grab the survey link and you can head out, and hopefully you enjoyed your lunchtime with us. But we'll see you next time. And we do have more trainings coming up. We've got some people skills one. We've got some effective meetings, and then check out our website at ctt.mtu.edu/training, and that'll get you to our training page for all of the upcoming things that we might be doing. And yeah, thanks so much, and we will hope to see you soon. All right, folks, we just got a few of you left in the room. I am gonna close the Zoom room down in about a minute. Give you still a chance to grab that SurveyMonkey link. If you still need it, that'll be how you get your certificate of attendance, as well as fill out the evaluation form. Again, thanks so much for coming. If you grab the link, you're free to go. And we hope to see you soon.